Sage grouse is often described as kind of a gray, chicken-like bird, but it's much more than that. There's a considerable difference in size between males and females. Males are almost twice the size of a female sage grouse, and during the spring, during the breeding season, they may reach weights of almost 8 pounds. They are the largest, outside of the turkey, the largest upland game bird in North America. They're the third largest game bird in the world. Sage grouse is commonly viewed as an umbrella species, and in fact, the health of sage grouse populations likely reflects the status and the health of other species that are dependent upon sagebrush. This would include pronghorn, mule deer, pygmy rabbits, sage thrashers, and a variety of other game and non-game species. Currently, sage grouse occupy parts of 11 western states and 2 Canadian provinces. They occupy and are entirely dependent upon our sagebrush uplands or sagebrush steppe. During the winter, the only thing sage grouse eat are the leaves and buds of sagebrush plants. So without brush, we will not have sage grouse. It's very simple in that respect. The threats vary depending on the actual location of the grouse population, but in general there are 2 major threats that sage grouse face. One is habitat loss and fragmentation, that is the breaking up of large blocks of habitat into smaller and smaller pieces due to wildfire and the invasion of various plant species, most notably cheatgrass, that provide fine fuels and result in more wildfire. The second big threat to sage grouse is the proliferation, the development of oil and gas, energy-related infrastructure, which especially in places like Montana and Wyoming have had very significant effects on sage grouse. There are also some sage grouse populations that are heavily impacted by disease. Mostly it's West Nile virus, which sage grouse simply don't seem to be able to defend themselves against. And we've seen in some areas, including parts of Oregon, fairly major die-offs due to West Nile virus. The great reason, or one of the large reasons for sage grouse being considered a candidate for listing under the Endangered Species Act is that the populations range-wide have declined precipitously since at least the 1960s. We're talking a reduction in overall range of almost 50%. And some of the more recent analyses have indicated range-wide these populations are declining at a rate of about 2% per year. So an example of how they might protect what's left would be by developing fire breaks that would reduce the size or even the chance of wildfire in sagebrush steppe. A nice example of how they might be fixing what's broken is by going in and removing stands of juniper which are invading our sagebrush steppe, and juniper tends to provide perching platforms, nesting sites for things that eat sage grouse and or sage grouse eggs. So grouse tend to avoid tall structures, and so it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, but it's a quick, relatively quick conservation action that can be taken to hopefully show short-term benefits.
Backcountry Hunters and Anglers is a conservation group. We want to protect our wild lands, our waters, and the outdoors in general. And we've been proactively involved in sage grouse conservation by helping remove some of the juniper trees which they don't like, specifically in the Heart Mountain area with the Antelope Preserve in the Heart Mountain. Oregon was very proactive in this regard when the threat first came out that the bird could be listed by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Oregon took that very seriously. At former Governor Kitzhaber's request and directive, a group called SageCon was formed. And SageCon brought together over 30 diverse groups: environmentalists, conservation groups, hunters, anglers, scientists, using the best available science that we could use to implement this. And they've come up with a great plan, and we're part of that, a draft plan which will be released in June to address conservation values around the sage grouse. Now, the state effort is unique. It really truly is, because without a state effort coupled with a BLM effort, we wouldn't be addressing the entire opportunity to conserve sage steppe out there. But the fact that we're in front of it and proactively addressing this area, there's a lot of optimism that we can bring the numbers back and hopefully prevent a listing. And because a listing would be good for no one. It'd be an entire new set of regulations that we would have to jump through, hoops to jump through that we don't even know what would be required at this point because there's no plan for that. The plan is to get in front of it now and make a difference. Well, the health of the sage grouse, the health of the whole environment and the system out there, the steppe. We're talking about 15 million acres in southeast Oregon. That's a lot of range. If the sage grouse is healthy, so is the mule deer. So are elk that come down from the high hills and seek shelter in the desert in the wintertime. So are antelope. They're healthier. It just helps the whole system. Plus, it helps cattlemen. Cattlemen have been there for 170 years in southeast Oregon. And when the system is healthy, so are the grasses, so are the forbs, so is the grazing capacity and ability. So what affects the sage grouse affects everything behind it. And if we can bring the sage grouse back to health, then we have a much healthier desert in Oregon.